On this episode of Law Weekly, we talk about the exclusive jurisdiction given to the Federal High Court in pre-election matters and the impact of the overloaded docket on the judges, other litigants, and the country. We have the views of a senior advocate of Nigeria, Adegboruwa. Also showing on the program, highlights from the unveiling of the public presentation of the compendium of 100 high-profile corruption cases in Nigeria as at November 2022, plus a recap of the top trending legal stories in the news. Hello and welcome to the program. I am Shola Shieli. By the amendment of Sections 29 subsection 5 and Section 83 subsection 14 of the Electoral Act 2022, the lot has fallen on the Federal High Court to exclusively hear pre-election matters, and this has no doubt added more pressure on the already overloaded dockets of the court, with over 1,000 pre-election matters already filed. It has also necessitated the establishment of a special task force of judges to swiftly hear and determine all these pre-election matter cases before it, with the consequent effect being the suspension of the hearing of all regular cases before the judges who constitutes this task force. At the new legal year ceremony of the court in Abuja, the Nigerian Bar Association faulted the decision of the National Assembly to limit the hearing and determination of pre-election cases to the court without regard for its infrastructural and manpower deficits. And this is the starting point of my conversation with senior advocate of Nigeria, Adegboruwa.
The amendment of the Electoral Act 2022 to insert the clause that all pre-election cases should be heard exclusively by the Federal High Court is a disservice to the concept of federalism, because we're talking about devolution of powers. We're talking about ensuring that we don't concentrate too much power at the center, whereby everybody looks up to the center as some big center where you run to for solutions. So I thought that the more we take power to the regions, take power to the states, the less attractive it is, for people to believe that you can only do it at the federal. So to that extent, it was totally wrong of the National Assembly to have put an exclusive clause in the Electoral Act, making the Federal High Court the only judicial organ that would determine pre-election cases. And the reason is very simple. Before now, during the regime of General Sani Abacha, the Federal High Court was clothed with jurisdiction on several matters under Section 251 of the Constitution. And that had created a lot of burden on that court, whereby everything that seems to matter in Nigeria, admiralty, currency, whatever you call it that matters in the country, is undertaken by the Federal High Court. So these are taking the shine away from the state high courts, which are left to determine just land matters, matrimonial causes, and those other irrelevant issues. So already the Federal High Court was overburdened, and we were looking for the opportunities to ensure that we take away some of these matters and decongest that court. And then came suddenly pre-election cases. And people do not agree to lose elections. And so you see the upsurge of cases that emanate from electoral disputes, especially in terms of leadership recruitment, primary elections, and other forms of choosing leaders for our people. And
the judges of that court are so overwhelmed, so much so that some of them even complain that other cases will have to wait till next year because they have to prioritize those cases before the elections.
No, I'll just give you an example. Recently, the Chief Judge of the Federal High Court constituted a special task force in Lagos to hear pre-election cases. And those courts for 1 month shut down their doors to other litigants, no matter how serious your case may be.
I witnessed that.
And then we started monitoring the courts, and you discover that there were some of those judges in that special task force that would just come to court, sit by 9 o'clock. The litigants are not there, the lawyers are not there, and for the whole day the judge is not doing anything. And because of the directive from the chief judge, he's not able to take other cases. So for that whole month, there was a total paralysis of the judicial system at that level. Yeah, and not just that, it also happened to election petition cases. By the time we get to 2023, about 400 judges have already been slated for various election tribunals. And once they start the election petition hearings, they suspend other cases that they should normally attend to. So I think that it's important, first of all, that our legislators should understand that you do not use legislation to target people. It doesn't work like that, because legislation is something permanent. It's always meant to address issues that affect the people. So you don't, for fear that governors would outsmart you, or that they would probably dominate the state judiciary, and because of that, you do not take pre-election cases to state high courts. If the judiciary in the state decide matter that in a way that is not acceptable, you will still go to the Court of Appeal. Because when the Federal High Court decides those cases, you still have to go to the Court of Appeal, where you can ventilate your grievances against any judgment that you may not agree with. So it's for us to get the legislature to remove that clause from the Electoral Act.
How do we do that?
It has to be an amendment. There are several other issues that needs to be amended in the current Electoral Act from our experiences. For instance, the confusion as to the issue of multiple candidature, whereby you participate in presidential election and then you lose, you quickly run back to the Senate or run back for governorship. So those issues created a lot of controversies and ambiguity, and they need to address those matters. The issue of running mate, placeholder, a lot of issues have come up since the amendment. And of course, it's commendable that it's an improvement on what we used to have, the 2010 Electoral Act. But we have now seen that the intentions have not been really addressed in terms of what they meant, set out to achieve. So it's necessary and important to amend the Electoral Act, but I don't think that can be done before the 2023 election.
I hear what you say about it's too late to amend before the 2023 elections, and we have to make do with what we have. But going forward, and also with regards to what you said about the intention of the legislators in inserting this clause, who do you think should champion the necessary reforms? Is this something that lawyers can drive, or the NBA in championing reform of these clauses that we've seen in the because if we leave it to the legislators, they just might not do anything about it?
Well, I believe that the 9th National Assembly owe our nation a duty to ensure that they put the machinery in place to facilitate an amendment. It may not be achieved during the tenure, because this Electoral Act has been ongoing for so many years. It was during the Saraki regime, even before the previous one. So it's not something that can occur just by fiat. So they should commence the process, just in the same way that they are currently working on amending the Constitution. They may not conclude it, but the process is there, collated and preserved, so that the coming assembly will then, yes, or surely some of them will still be retained in the assembly, so they can quickly put up the process whereby they can fast track the amendment even when the new regime comes. In terms of championing such amendments, I know that there are civil society organizations that have specific responsibility towards ensuring that voters' engagement and legislation relating to election are properly amended. And so I expect the civil society organizations to spearhead this. And then also the Nigerian Bar Association as a pressure group. Our major focus is rule of law. That is the motto of the NBA, to promote the rule of law. So, and the greatest way to promote rule of law is to ensure that the system of recruiting leaders is very transparent and foolproof and has acceptable mechanism for dispute resolution. So to that extent, the NBA should also be involved. And I think the executive too. I'm talking about the president and the governors, the ministers. Everybody has now become a stakeholders, because this election affects virtually everybody. So they should also be part of the process towards ensuring that we amend it. And then INEC itself, being the custodian of relevant information and data, should also partner with the National Assembly, collate all the cases and the judgments, extract the important principles, and take the benefit from them to suggest amendments and get relevant experts, lawyers, political consultants that can put up a draft which can be shared, and then we'll come up with something that is acceptable. So holistically, to involve everybody, all stakeholders.
Do you share the view that a special court should be vested with powers to try election petition cases, as has been mooted, by so many people, and should also try electoral offenders? Do you think that is something that we need going forward
I don't
as
think
part
so.
of the reforms?
I don't think so. We have had this call. EFCC is called for special court. Even customs is called for special court.
I think everybody just
and
believes that special courts will fast track
NDLA is also calling
yes.
for special court. So, and that just tells you about the frustration in the system of administration of justice. The delay, is totally unacceptable. And so when you have these special courts, it will take judges that will man those courts, and those judges are currently handling one or two cases here and there. So when the politicians came up with this idea, they didn't do special courts. What they just did was to ensure that they gave a time limit within which to hear their own political cases, to take it from the rot and delay that every other person is experiencing. And you see how that has affected the administration of justice, because virtually the whole system is now at the mercy of political cases, both in the appellate courts and indeed in the high courts. And the serious matters suffer relating to people's freedom, relating to property, commercial transactions. So we can't go in this game of seeking special courts just to get out of the rut. So it's to address the foundation of what is causing the delay in the administration of justice, lack of funding. Because it is human beings that will man these special courts, lack of infrastructure, electricity, internet. I mean, these special courts will also rely on this. You are not going to import generators to power those special courts at the expense of others. So
they will be bogged down by the same.
So they will, the same problems will get them down. So the proper thing for us is to just sit down and identify the issues that are causing frustration in the administration of justice and address them holistically.
I agree with a lot of the things that you said, but some other people have also said that, and this is talking about senior lawyers, have also mooted the idea that with regards to election petition cases, which we're even complaining about, that, we've settled the Federal High Court with, that perhaps it's time to bring in retired judges to come and handle those set of cases. People who, instead of, we've complained about lack of funding, we even have inadequate judges to it, because like we've identified, it's the judges who are hearing the regular cases that are pulled away to handle all of these election petition cases. So let's try retired judges. Let them come and hear these election petition cases, and perhaps that would take the burden away from the regular courts and they would move faster. Is that something you think can work?
Well, there are two issues with retired judges. The first is age. The second is health. We don't want to name names. Most people who retire from the judiciary are bogged down with one health challenge or the other, because of the environment, because of the pressure of work. And so some of them even retire voluntarily because of those challenges that we mentioned.
But surely we can find some that are still in good health.
Yes, so that's one point. The second point is, and I say with all due respect to all of them, we have had challenges with the roles played by retired judges in facilitating corruption of the judiciary. It's a major challenge. We don't want to name names, like I said, but the examples we have about people becoming vehicles for
consultants, I think that's what
yes, vehicles for corruption is totally mind-boggling. And once you have done it once, you then become a target or a victim, even for other matters. So to that extent, I have a challenge with somebody who is not under the control of anybody, for instance, NJC. How do you sanction a judge who has retired and is not under any obligation to answer any query from the National Judicial Council? Are you going to consult another ombudsman or another supervisory agency for them? And so those are the issues that I have personally, with retired judges coming on board.
Welcome back. In commemoration of this year's International Anti-Corruption Day, the Human and Environmental Development Agenda HEDA Resource Center has asked Nigerian lawmakers to complete the review of the country's constitution or face legal action. HEDA identified gaps in the constitution which hinders effective reduction of corruption in the country and urged professionals and other regulatory bodies to do more to sanction its members who are found culpable. These and more were the discussions at the public presentation of the 6th edition of the Compendium on 100 high-profile corruption cases in Nigeria.
Was a place where you can go that is not a...
Human and Environmental Development Agenda HEDA Resource Center is a non-governmental organization and non-partisan human rights and development league. Amongst other things, the center conducts research, policy advocacy, training, as well as citizens' awareness and mobilization on core development issues, including human rights and public sector accountability. It's for these reasons and more that it has gathered this group of key stakeholders drawn from law enforcement agencies, the judiciary, representatives of civil society, the media, and others for the public presentation of the 6th edition of its compendium of 100 high-profile corruption cases in Nigeria. Chairing the event is a recently retired Justice of the Federal High Court, Justice Taiwo.
Corruption is well known to us. I don't have to go into it. It stares us in the face every day on the streets, especially when we see those children who are meant to be in school out of school. The roads are bad. Not that we don't have money in Nigeria, we do. But then these monies end up in private pockets.
A foremost prosecutor with the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Adegboruwa, then proceeds to review the compendium. He also speaks to the challenges impeding the expeditious determination of some of the cases listed in the book.
The absence of special court to try these offences. The prosecution of corruption cases is in conventional court, often delayed due to volume of cases handled by the court and the priority that is accorded to some of these specific high-profile cases. The transfer of judges and their elevation to Supreme Court and retirement also affect the smooth prosecution of corruption cases. In most cases where judges are transferred to other divisions of the court, cases tremendously suffer and often start de novo. On rare occasion, fiat are issued to some judges to continue adjudicating on cases that are part-time. In that situation, the cases move at snail pace.
Other stakeholders also weighed in on possible solutions for dealing with corruption.
Most of the time, we tend to do a kind of blame game. This person will be putting the blame on another person. These are the people that are corrupt. These are the people that are corrupt. But I just want to point it out to us that if you look at our society today, this corruption victim is in every sector of society. And if you want to fight it, that means all of us must be ready and be prepared.
When you make this business of fighting a corruption and everybody affair, that we are all guilty, we all have to, you make it a nobody affair. You end up by saying, well, since I'm not perfect, I can't point a finger. And yet we need people who are not perfect. We all have to, the fingers have to be pointed. It may be that in the Bible, Jesus said, let he who is without sin cast the first stone, but we can't afford that luxury. We can't afford that luxury. So even those of us who are with sin must be in a position to cast stones at those whom we perceive to be with bigger sin. So I want to say that perhaps this absolutist approach is not going to help us.
that God will arrest endemic corruption in Nigeria.
The high point of the event was the public presentation of the compendium. Heather says it is unfortunate that many of those saddled with public offices are corrupt. The organization, however, restated its commitment to the war against graft by pledging to continue the publication of the compendium, to remind the public of the corruption cases still lingering in the courts, and to discourage others from engaging in corrupt practices.
This current National Assembly should not go away without completing the constitutional reform that they started. And I think perhaps we should be looking at possibly suing this assembly and the several other assemblies that will start the process, spend billions of our money in the name of doing constitutional reforms and abandon the project before, because we are in dire need of a constitutional reform.
And just before we go, let's quickly do a recap of some of the top trending stories from the courtrooms. We begin with the report that the Court of Appeal sitting in Port Harcourt, Rivers State, has set aside the judgment of a federal high court that sacked all candidates of the All Progressives Congress for the 2023 general elections, including the party's governorship candidate, Toyin Cole. The three-man special panel of the Court of Appeal in the judgment delivered by Justice Mohammed Shaibu said George, Olu and the 5 other respondents who filed the suit did not exhaust the internal party mechanism before instituting the suit. The court also held that the respondents failed to participate in the Congress of the APC and so did not have any cause of action and locus standi to go to court. From the Court of Appeal, we move to the Federal High Court in Abuja. Justice Inyang Ekwo has dismissed a suit by a former Minister of State for Education, Chukwuemeka Nwajuba, and the Incorporated Trustees of Rights for All International, RAI, against the All Progressives Congress presidential candidate Bola Tinubu and his People's Democratic Party counterpart Atiku Abubakar. In the judgment, Justice Ekwo declined jurisdiction on the grounds that the plaintiffs lacked the legal right to have filed the suit. In the suit, Nwajuba and the RAI had sought, among other things, to void the primaries that produced Tinubu and Atiku as candidates of the APC and PDP for the next presidential election. They also asked the court to replace Tinubu with the ex-minister who said he participated in APC's primary but scored no vote. At the same Federal High Court, another judge, Justice Bolaji Olajuwon, has set aside its November 29, 2022 order committing the Inspector General of Police Usman Alkali Baba to prison for contempt. The court held in a ruling that there was evidence that the IGP has substantially complied with the court's earlier order directing the reinstatement of Patrick Okoli, who was compulsorily retired as a police officer. Justice Olajuwon held that in view of the development, the application by the IGP seeking the vacation of the committal order is worthy of sympathetic consideration. At the High Court of the Federal Capital Territory, also in Abuja, Justice Silvanus Orji has declined to grant a motion seeking to stop the new cash withdrawal policy of the Central Bank of Nigeria. The application was brought before the court by 10 named applicants for themselves and on behalf of 20 million Nigerian citizens who do not use banks. The applicants had asked the court to grant injunctions restraining the president, the CBN, and others from proceeding with the January 31, 2023 deadline of the use of the current 200 naira, 500 naira, and 1,000 naira notes as it affects the citizens without any real plans or workable guidelines to cover the over 20 million unbanked Nigerians who are vulnerable to information and the use of technologically driven platforms without the possibility of financial inclusion. Justice Orji declined the request but rather directed that all the respondents be put on notice to come and show cause on January the 10th, 2023, why the order for injunction should not be granted against them. And we round off in Lagos with the report that the governor of the state, Babajide Sanwo-Olu,
has performed the groundbreaking ceremony for the redevelopment and reconstruction of the historic Igboshire High Court, which was destroyed in the wake of the violence that trailed the October 2020 #EndSARS protests across the nation. The reconstruction of the Phase 1 of the court is expected to cost about 9 billion naira and is estimated to be completed within 18 months. Governor Sanwo-Olu, while flagging off the reconstruction project, assured the gathering that the High Court will be better and more beautiful when completed.
And that's the program for today. If you missed any part of it, you can find it on past episodes on our YouTube channel. Do also give us feedback via any of our social media platforms. I'm Shola Shele. Thank you for watching and see you next week.